I'll tell you what's going to happen. You will ask the questions. When time is up, you must make up your mind which one you want to go out with, and that's all there is to it, okay?
What's up, guys? Danielle here, NeutralSupport.net. So today is the day that I get to dive into the full review of the Remco bike lift. I got to have it for a few weeks, got to really get used to it, feel like it's my own, and put it through its paces. Now, this review, I'm going to really test its limits, see if we can get some measurable numbers, answer some of the questions you guys had from the last video. So let's dive right in.
Just falls. Oh, he's got to hold it. He's moving a little too fast. Oh, he punched through. Good time.
So let's start with a little bit of basic function to review. So the stand itself, this is actually the Remco bike lift with the adapter for professional clamps. All that means is it came with this adapter that allows you to use your park or your EVT clamp right away in here. You don't have to necessarily buy a clamp. And that's one of the cool things from Remco is you can actually configure the stand to be just what you're missing and not what you already have. So I already had clamps and I already had a base. So they only had to send me the physical stand itself and a cable cover, which I just moved this so I'm not really using, but they do offer lots of cool things. You can configure it however you want. The actual operation is dirt simple, right? It's like an old radio in your car. You got your program buttons here that you can set to any height. Like right now, 1 and 3 are actually shortest and tallest position, and 2 is somewhere in the middle, and that's just an arbitrary thing that I chose. You can actually set the height to be whatever you want. So you can actually really customize where the bike is going at any time, as easy as just pushing M, selecting a number, and whatever height it's at, that will be that number. So that's it, these 4 buttons, and then you have your jog arrows, and they're really sensitive, so you can actually move in pretty small increments up and down. In terms of operation, that's it. The stand just works, has a 100-pound lift capacity, and shoot, we're gonna test that out. So when you're using the professional clamp receiver, it works the same way as the park tool does, in that there's a small lever here that you can tighten to keep it from rotating or loosen to allow the bike to rotate. And what I find is that when I put a bike in the stand, I can't keep it from rotating easily with this lever. So I've got the bike in the stand, I've got the lever tight, pretty significantly tight. You'll see as the bike is lifted up, it's actually still pivoting down. And in one of the test videos, this happened with the bike also. So it reaches an equilibrium point on its own and kind of stops rotating. But really, like, I don't want to be able to rotate it that easily. And you just have to really wrench on this lever here to get it to not. If you look at a park stand or you look at the EVT lift stand or any stand like that, the lever in this position is actually significantly longer. As luck would have it, the lever from the park tool stand actually fits in this spot. It doesn't have the all position, like this is a 360-degree lever, so you can lift and turn to notched spaces that let you move it into the right spot. This one's just 50-50, but it's still, the leverage is so important to keep things from rotating, and that's definitely highlighted as you add more and more weight. So for the rest of the testing, I'm just gonna leave this one in here. So keep that in mind, and maybe that would be a good design change in the future. Just to prove that I'm not being crazy, I just put it in and I'll put the bike back in. So even just with that little bit of leverage, it was able to hold the bike stable. And that would be useful for when you're working on something like internal routing or something like that, where you need to tip the bike and you need the stand to hold that easily. This amount of leverage isn't going to damage anything, but it will give you that little bit of mechanical advantage that lets you keep the bike where you need it to stay. I got a lot of questions about dimension.
We're here for the historical measurement.
At its tallest, the receiver is actually right under 5 feet. With the EVT clamp, you get to add some to that. So let's do some measurements. I'll go ahead and put it at its lowest. So it's right about 39 inches to the center of the EVT clamp. The EVT clamp adds 5.5 inches, so think 34 inches with just a standard park clamp. If you look at a standard park clamp, it'll be coming out directly from the receiver as opposed to having that upward angle of the EBT. I just like the EBT clamp, even though I'm short and I don't need my stand to be super tall. But some of you taller guys probably would benefit from using something like an EBT to bring the bike up that much more, just so that you have a little bit of an advantage. So let's go to the top. So 64 inches to the center of the EBT clamp. For me, that's plenty. That's actually too much. If you're used to using something like a Park double neck stand or even a single neck stand, that's still gonna be pretty darn tall. The Park stationary stands obviously don't move up and down, so you just pick a medium level. Now, some of the other lift stands, you might be able to get a little higher or lower than this, but even the EBT is limited on how high the clamp can go because the counterweight touches the bottom of the ground, so there's no more counterweight. You could feasibly push it up, but there would just be slack. It wouldn't actually be lifted anymore. Some other concerns were weight capacity, motor sound, and the speed of lifting it. So we talked about the maximum capacity being 100 pounds. So we're actually going to put different levels of weight on here, measure how long it takes and how loud it gets. So the first test weight is 25 pounds. So nothing crazy, not the lightest bike on the market, but just a normal bike, not likely to be an e-bike or anything like that. A really good baseline for just what you're doing every day. So about 15.6, give or take for my lag and being able to push it, but 15.6 seconds for 25 pounds, about 50 decibels of noise. So they told me about 50 decibels, so that holds true. Let's juice it up.
And we want to pump you up.
All right, so we're just gonna do the same thing, but this is 50 pounds now. So we're gonna see if the time changes or the sound changes. Yeah, so the average is right around 50 again. It's about 48 when it's going up, and it's maybe 52 as it gets towards the top at its highest point. 15.3 seems like 50 pounds or 25 pounds. It doesn't matter yet to the motor what it's lifting. So we're just gonna go right to the top. Let's take it to 100. All right, we need to get an extra 5 pounds in here somehow, so. There we go. All right, so this is 100 pounds. I did ask them before doing this if 100 pounds meant the clamp and the bike and anything that the stand was moving, and they said no, it is literally just the bike. So this is 100 pounds of bike, give or take. Now a bike, the difference between this weight and a bike is that this weight is all concentrated in the center. A bike obviously would spread the weight out and add some lever to this, but still 100 pounds. I'd say most of the bikes you're gonna lift won't be 100 pounds, so we'll see how it does with this in this test environment. The same, effectively the same. So still right there between 49 and 50. It had a couple of 54 or 56 readings when it was getting in that towards the top area that we were talking about, but really it's just averaging right around 50, just like all the other weights. Basically, all that this tells me is that it doesn't seem like the motor is under any additional strain over the spectrum of weight that you're supposed to use this stand for. And that's a good thing, because if you build something to only do up to exactly a point, up to its threshold, the threshold never performs well. So that tells me that this is an overbuilt stand that has a threshold that's conservative, because they know if you stay within the conservative bounds, the stand will perform well. It's not putting extra strain on the machine to do this versus 25 pounds. It's like a detuned engine. It's doing exactly what it's capable of, and that's what's gonna make it last, hopefully. So we see that it lifts well, we see that it's quiet. Heck, it's quieter than the lights in here some days. So none of that is an issue. It really does feel like it's overbuilt, and I think that that speaks to its long-term durability. Now, I've only had it for a few weeks. I can't tell you what it's going to be like in 2 years, but I can tell you that Remco has a 5-year warranty. They will replace the parts on it due to their own defect if they fail. So you shouldn't be nervous about the motors or anything like that, because you do have a long time to find out if they're just not going to cut it. Now, Remco actually has a test unit named Hank in the shop that lifts 108 pounds basically all day. He's at over 40,000 cycles and still going with no maintenance. So not only is the stand durable, does it do what it says it's going to do at a little over its max capacity, but it didn't require any maintenance besides wiping down the outside of the stand. So if we're worried about durability or worried about maintaining the stand, it really doesn't seem like that's going to be a concern. Ideally, according to Remco, you don't do anything to the inside of the stand. You just clean the outside of the stand. The buttons themselves are IPX4 waterproof. They do recommend that you don't like poke them with tools because they're rubberized. But if you do happen to screw up this piece, it's super easy to replace. I did actually disassemble this test unit as far as you can. Now, some of you will be disappointed because when you disassemble it, you can actually take almost everything off of it, but you can't really get into the sheathing easily because there's a weld plate on top, and it's not mine, so I'm not going to go cutting anything or trying to get it any deeper. I don't want to mess it up, but that just tells me they're very confident that you will not need to open it up because they have already taken care of that and they have already lubricated the inside. All of it is shielded from dust and dirt in the shop, so you don't need to do anything except clean the outside of the sleeves. That's it. So to address a couple of specific questions, some of them around where the buttons are on the stand. So they do end up right behind the bike as you're working, and they're kind of facing you so you can see them, you can click them, all that stuff. This plate that the clamp mounts to is actually a perfect square. So if you didn't like that, it would be possible to just rotate this 90 degrees to have the controls on the side. I probably wouldn't put them on the back because it does seem like it is justified forward a little bit on the square. So you would move the whole clamping surface closer to the back, but to either side would be totally doable. I actually thought about something more like, so this is actually the safety button for this CNC machine, and it's something that can't be lost. So I understand not wanting to have a remote because we all have employees or have had employees and know that a remote is a completely lost cause. It will be gone. But if you had some way to click a button from away from the bike, this is just in case your CNCing goes way wrong and you need to stop it. You can just click the button and not be real close while the tool breaks off and flies in your face. Similar idea, if you had something like this, you could actually stand back and push the button. If you had a remote, you might be able to just mount it maybe on the bench or on the wall behind you so you could actually click it and have the stand move without it. So they've already researched whether you could have a remote or whether you could have something like this, and they've decided against it, I'm sure for very good reasons, but it might be nice to have an upgrade in the future where you'd be able to get like an optional remote or something like that. It would probably add some amount of complexity to the system that's not there, and everything you add ends up in price. So keeping this thing under 700 bucks is actually pretty cool. Maybe you don't need a remote. So the idea of a remote kind of opens the door for a different problem, and that is that this unit does not have a ground sensor, and that is a big concern to a lot of people. Interesting that it's such a big concern though, because the only lift stand on the market that has a ground sensor is the Junior. The Park Tool does not. And one of the challenges that Remco faced when building this unit and trying to integrate a ground sensor was that ground sensors are either way too sensitive or not sensitive enough. So I kind of wanted to get a measurement of how much force this stand was putting down on an object if you were to accidentally hit the button, turn around, and leave something under the bike. Are you going to damage a bike? Are you going to damage a wheel? So let's try an experiment. So this is a glass scale. All right, so I have this clamped in the stand. It's going to come down onto the scale. I'd like to know how much force it's going to put down, if it's going to quit at any point, or if it won't. it might just sit here and try to keep pushing. So I do have the plug here to pull, and I'm going to keep an eye on the scale and try to get a decent weight before it quits, or before I get too nervous and pull the scale, or before it breaks the glass scale. So we'll see. All right, so what has happened is it is putting 250-ish pounds of pressure on this, but it did stop. So basically what it ended up doing was this errored and stopped pushing down when it put the pressure on, and it quit. So now we get to see if I just bought a stand. So it has an EO1 error, which just means it encountered something outside of what it expected to encounter, and it quit, which is good because you don't want it to keep going and you don't want it to keep trying. If you hold down the down arrow like we did in the beginning when I got it, it'll reset. So now it has reset. I hold down again. Okay, so I reset the stand after that error. So now we can see if it actually will keep working. There you have it. So it looks like what ends up happening, it is not a ground sensor. It puts a heck of a ton of force on a scale, but it does eventually stop. It's not so dumb that it just keeps trying and trying and trying until it catches on fire or something like that. And 250 pounds of pressure is a lot of pressure, but that's also like a big person. So if you have a bike and it's touching wheels, chances are you're not really going to do much damage. In fact, with wheels, if you're familiar with Bill Mold, he put one on his car one time. So I don't anticipate that the stand is going to break anything. Now, if you have a bike that has a top tube that you're not allowed to sit on and you end up putting it somehow where this is contacting the top tube, yeah, you'll probably damage it. But I don't anticipate that the stand will be responsible for damaging anything that you accidentally contact when it's coming down, thus making a ground sensor kind of an additional expense that you don't really need. And we don't want stands to be more expensive. That's part of the reason this thing's so great. So a couple more notes about things that I've encountered while I've been testing it. So people asked about cargo bikes because they explicitly say like not designed for cargo bikes. That's not because the stand can't lift the weight of a cargo bike, but it's more because the leverage of a cargo bike with a clamp style system just doesn't really work out. They don't say this, but I imagine you could use 2 of these at either end of a cargo bike and actually lift with some kind of hoist mechanism or hooks from the clamp surface. But without the 2 on each end, you do have a lot of leverage with cargo, and that's why they say no cargo bikes. So what's nice about the Remco, besides the fact that it's super quiet and it fits in a relatively small package and it costs almost no money relative to the cost of every other lift stand on the market, it holds the bike up even if you walk away. And there's no braking system or anything like that. If you put a bike in this stand, you could probably leave it for a full month without touching it. You'd come back, it'd be at exactly the same height. So some of the issues with a chain-driven lift stand is that it needs a brake. And if you don't use the brake and you pull the bike up, sometimes even while you're working, it'll bring the bike back down if it's heavy enough. That system doesn't work as efficiently as this system. Now, one of the comments on YouTube was like, oh, it's kind of like a standing desk. It is 100% like a standing desk because apparently that's the industry where the creators came from. And the whole impetus was that he needed a repair stand and hurt his back and didn't like lifting his bike up and down, and utilized a standing desk mechanism to make a repair stand that lifted up. And then maybe the best electric lift stand ever made was created. So good things come from odd places sometimes. So let's make some claims here. You know I love my EVT lift stand. It's in the shop. I use it all the time. It is great. The thing that I love the most about it is that it is fully mechanical. There's no electricity associated with it, kind of like an analog bicycle. It works without anything except for human input, and that is something cool on its own. So my issue is that I already have a lift stand that I do love, and I already have multiple stands, and even just having this stand for a few weeks, I was like, maybe I could just keep it. I don't need a stand, but it is so good that it made me want to keep it. So I'm serious. Just buy one of these. If you need a lift stand and you're in the market, this is the one to buy. Seriously. End of statement.
It's over. Go home.
So thank you for watching. I hope that you found this review useful, especially those of you that are looking at different lift stands. I really think that the Remco is super versatile and fits in a lot of spaces that other lift stands just don't quite fill right now. Check out their website. Remco has some really cool configurations where you can do a double neck, you could get base plates. If you're one of those people who thinks feedback makes a good clamp, you can even get one with a feedback clamp. So really head over to their website. I'll link to it below. Check out what they're doing. It's very cool. If you'd like to support this channel in any way, feel free to subscribe to it. It'll tell you every time I put out a video. You can also yell at me in the comments if you want below. Also, head over to neutralsport.net. I've got swag, hats, apron shirts, all kinds of things you can get. Dropper buddies, UCI hood angle tools, any other number of cool things you can buy that also help support the channel for when I don't get to just have stuff to test or get given stuff. I end up just buying it because I think it's cool. So I always appreciate all of your support. Can't thank you enough. And as always, I hope you have a good day.